Happy Monday, YouTube. Welcome to another week of madness and mayhem, chaos, and glory. It is sunny. The truck is telling me it's 55 degrees outside. I'm not sure I believe it, but I'll take it. It beats the crap out of 15 or 5, which I've experienced in the last week, which was not fun. Anyway, first up, Ukraine. I have not caught up on the news from yesterday through to today, but the last I was aware, the UN was doing something about something. I have no idea what's going on with them. But as far as I'm aware as of now, which I haven't double checked to see what's what, Ukraine has not yet fallen. And for all you out there who may be Ukrainian or have Ukrainian friends or family or co-workers or teammates or whatever, I really do hope that you are all doing well as best as you possibly can be under the circumstances. And for the people of Ukraine, I'm hoping you guys pull it out, that you were able to sustain your independence and inspire Russia to go back home. Because Russia, no matter what happens in Ukraine, win or loss, is in for a very rough time. The Russian economy is being hit very hard, very quickly with sanctions. The ruble is basically in the toilet and been flushed. The oligarchs and the government has been sanctioned. The banks have been sanctioned. And yeah, these will be slow-rolling sanctions that will ramp up over time. But still in all, the net result is Russia is in a very poor situation economically, and it will be that way for some time to come, which is extraordinarily unfortunate for the Russian people, with whom I think the vast majority of people on the planet of Earth do not have a problem with. Unfortunately, the government of Russia is a little bit special. That's just kind of, it is what it is. As far as how this conflict is hitting home in the States, for those who are truckers or who are just at least tangentially or somewhat cognizantly aware of the situation, energy costs have gone up pretty significantly. I was out and about yesterday, and it cost $3.99 a gallon for 87 octane unleaded in the far burbs of Chicago, and which is not horrible. I mean, I've seen worse. I remember when gas was $4.50, $4.60 on average in the Chicagoland area back in 05, 06, after Hurricane Katrina knocked out the Gulf Coast refinery processes for a while. And yeah, things were a bit special right then, and that was right before the Great Recession hit, so double trouble. So yeah, it's energy. Diesel has always, at least for the last year, 2 years, give or take, has always been 30 to 40 to 50 cents more expensive per gallon than regular octane fuel. And now it was almost equal. I mean, I think diesel was $4.15, $4.20 a gallon up by home. And I fueled up this morning, and it cost $4.08 a gallon, which is about the best I was going to get around the Chicagoland area, and any capacity anywhere near the Chicagoland area of Northern Illinois. So special. But this is one of the consequences of this conflict that will be felt at home for Americans. It will also be felt at home for a lot of people in Europe and Asia, Africa, the Middle East. Well, maybe not the Middle East, but just everywhere where energy is consumed in a very, very large capacity, and the country in question is not an energy producer or a net exporter, which is why I don't think Saudi Arabia is going to be too heartbroken about the cost of energy as a result of Russia's shenanigans. But the folks in the U.S. not going to be happy. The freedom convoys of the U.S. are making their way towards Washington, D.C., and one of the elements they're going to be protesting will be the cost of fuel, which is significant for us as truck drivers. I mean, this morning I paid about $500 to fuel up my truck. I put 130 odd gallons in, and I think the total cost was, with diesel and DEF, was about probably $510, $520, something like that. So significant cost, which is extremely unfortunate, but that is just the nature of the beast. It's the nature of the business. It is, unfortunately, what it is. I can remember going into the Wayback Machine to when, 2014, 15, 16 time frame when American fracking was really picking up steam. Saudi Arabia turned on the oil taps and flooded the earth with oil to the point we had an oil glut that was so huge that tankers were literally sitting outside of ports, I think on a global scale, waiting to get in to offload the crude oil for refining. Well, first for storage and then for refining. But there was a long time where tankers were literally stacked up in, Gulf of Mexico, I believe, east and west coast of the U.S. and I think outside of even some European countries too. I really don't remember the exact ins and outs, but still, Saudi Arabia viewed American shale oil production and fracking as a threat to their dominance in the oil market, so they flooded the earth with oil. As a result, we had so much oil that prices fell off a cliff. It was beautiful. I think oil was down below $60 a barrel at one point, and that translated into the lowest price for fuel I had seen, I think, since 2003 or 4, maybe 2005, where fuel was, I can remember seeing it for sure at $1.21 a gallon around Chicago area, but I don't remember if it got any lower than that. But it was definitely down in the low $1 range, and it was a brilliant thing. And that was only 5 years ago, 6 years ago. And there was a little blurb put out that when Donald Trump took office in January 2021, I think the national average, according to this graphic, I didn't substantiate this, so fact check it for yourself, but the national average price of fuel, octane fuel in the U.S. when Donald Trump took office was $1.47 a gallon. Now that was January 2017. It is now, it is February 28th, 2022, and fuel cost, it's now, I think the national average, well, the average of what I'm seeing $3.98 for regular octane fuel. Okay, correction. Right across the street from where I'm being unloaded, there is a gas station, and they are quoting unleaded at $3.83 a gallon. This is in central Illinois. Diesel they have at $3.69, but they don't have a way for me to get my truck in there, so it's probably not green diesel, might be red diesel. I really don't know for sure. But I just know I can't get in there to fuel up because, well, the awning's too low. It would cost me more to get in there than it would to actually benefit me. So unfortunately, I don't get the benefit from the cheap diesel. But this is a rural area, a farming community, so that is their cost of fuel for these guys, which, good for them, because it's 40 cents more expensive on the interstates at the big truck stops, but cost of doing business. So that was then. Why am I talking about that history now when, we've got much bigger fish to fry trying to hope and pray that Ukraine remains an independent nation in the face of Russian governmental aggression? That is because the United States has the opportunity to reverse President Biden's decisions to, basically hamstring American energy production by, allowing permits to be reissued to allow American energy production to return to what it was under President Trump, which would be to our strategic and economic advantage. It's a combined face there, because during Donald Trump's presidency, we were a net exporter of oil, and that helped to kind of keep the prices of fuel at a stable-ish level. Yeah, things were in the twos, the high twos, low threes, which not fun, but not exactly the end of the world either. Now, COVID did put a really big dent into the cheap fuel cost for a long time, just because different supply chain issues caused some shortages here and there, and prices went up. But even so, factor COVID out, and you don't take away the reversal of Trump-era energy policies, and fuel costs are still under $3 a gallon for both diesel and regular octane fuel, which is good for the economy, because the average consumer is now paying less to fuel, and of course now, and ideally, probably less to heat and cool their homes and everything else. But because of where things are now, that is not the case. That's not how things are going to end up being, which is very unfortunate. But we have the opportunity to return to our net oil exporting ways, or net energy exporting ways, and help to bring some control and stability back into the energy market, just because as an exporter of energy, we will be able to have a say in the price of energy, which would be ideal, because with various economies across the planet trying to recover post-COVID, because we're basically in a post-COVID situation right now. Everyone's almost all the way opened up. I mean, today, Illinois removed the mask mandate statewide, so I mean, things are opening back up. We're getting past COVID, but of course now we have the threat of world war to sort of move from one catastrophe to the next, which is super fun. But we have the ability to be a net exporter of energy. Now, a lot of folks don't like petroleum-based energy, but unfortunately, tough. That is where the economies of the planet are at. No matter what, from now, February 28th, 2022, through probably, December 31st, 2042, we will be primarily a combustion-powered or a combustion energy set of economies. That's just the way it's going to be. We're going to be burning some form of fuel in trucks, cars, trains, planes, ships, power plants, all kinds of things, whether it's coal, natural gas, heavy fuel oil, or nuclear energy of some sort. Those are going to underpin the economy of the United States and indeed the world, because it is reliable, it is controllable, and it is, it's there. And it's not going to go away anytime soon, because wind and solar depend on the weather. And Europe experienced a wind drought, which bit them hard in the backside when they went big on the wind energy systems, and they had no wind to power them. So they experienced brownouts like California did. Now, a lot of folks want to go green. They want to put batteries and everything, and they want to have electric cars and all that other stuff. I mean, okay, great, it's all well and good, but unfortunately, if we all went electric right now, I mean, this very instant, if we all went electric across the board, trucks, trains, planes, cars, houses, everything is electric. There is no combustion process at all, no nuclear reaction process, all it's just wind and solar. How in the absolute world are we going to actually be able to power anything? Because we consume so much energy in the US, I don't even know the figures. I just know that if we went completely battery, completely electric, with no combustion whatsoever to generate power, the grid will shut down, because there will not be enough power to sustain the demand, because there's not enough wind generated on a 24-hour basis to underpin the power needs of the United States. Just even some of the major cities in the United States. Yeah, some states in the U.S. Produce enough energy in that state to power the majority of that state's needs. And, they underpin a good portion of the grid that they're associated with, whether it's the eastern grid or the western grid or whatever the case may be. But if we win 100% wind and solar, there's no way we can sustain the demand for power. Like, we have to decide what day of the week we get to charge our car, what day of the week we get to charge our phones, what day of the week we get to charge our computers, what day of the week we can be on the internet, what day of the week we run the hospitals, what day of the week the bank is open, because the power needs just aren't there. So unfortunately, we need petroleum-based energy to underpin the economy. We need coal-based energy. We need nuclear-based energy, because these are consistent, reliable forms of energy. Are they dirty? Yes. That is a consequence of the society that we have built for ourselves. We are dependent on everything being powered, and just, it is what it is. So the consequence of that is, guess what? You've got to be able to actually generate the energy to sustain the demand. And if we go full green, the energy won't be there. We don't have enough infrastructure in that regard set up to actually make that transition. And we won't, because the demand for energy is just constantly going up. And with more electric cars coming on stream, and then eventually electric trucks, and then they say electric trains and planes, those all got to be charged, and they're going to need even more power, because they have to pack even more energy into those battery cells in order to power a 200-ton locomotive pulling 10,000-ton freight trains, or a 100-ton aircraft that's got to fly 2,000 miles. You need a lot of power to make that happen, and fuel just does it better. It's just much more energy dense and much more reliable. That's just the way it is. So we need to get our energy independence back, because it's going to enable us to then look to the future of blending fuels. Now, why am I talking about that? Well, before all this mess broke out, there's a company, I forget the name of it, but they just signed an agreement to set up a sustainable aviation fuel facility near O'Hare Airport in Illinois. And that facility will serve and supply sustainable aviation fuel, which is a kerosene blended with a biodiesel base, I believe, or a biofuel base, in order to then feed the demand to blend SAF into aviation fuel to serve O'Hare Airport and then Midway Airport, which are two major airports in the Midwest of the United States. They have a lot of domestic traffic, and of course for O'Hare, a ton of international traffic, both passenger and cargo. So O'Hare is a major nexus of aviation, and Chicago in general is a major nexus of aviation. They want to bring sustainable aviation fuel to the Chicago market, because Chicago sees airliners literally on a global scale. And being able to blend aviation fuel with sustainable aviation fuel, that's going to reduce carbon emissions. They say it's just as efficient, or it could even be more efficient than current fuel blends and formulas that they're using. And also, the modern new jet engines, like on the 787 Dreamliner, the new 777X, the Airbus A350, the 737 MAX, the A320neo, which means new engine option. Those engines have all been built from the ground up to be able to work with both regular standard aviation fuel and also sustainable aviation fuel, meaning a biofuel aviation fuel blend, a biofuel petroleum blend, okay? Which is great news, because if they're able to blend that at the aviation level, eventually they'll be able to then use some kind of similar formula to work in these diesel trucks, which means we could actually have sustainable diesel fuel, SDF, beyond just ethanol blending or whatever they're doing to make it a little bit greener, leaner, and meaner. Which I honestly don't know what they're doing, how they're doing it, why they're doing it. The science is beyond me, and I'll be fine admitting that. But still, sustainable diesel fuel is a possibility, and there will be significant demand for it, because if this same truck could suddenly, reduce its carbon footprint by even 5% on a year in, year out basis, that's a colossal amount of carbon emissions that this one truck then stops making, but it's doing the same work, moving, rating at a weight rating of 80,000 pounds. I never hit 80,000 pounds, but I can if I really, really have to, or the load demands it. But still, if we can get leaner, meaner, and greener, we can keep our petroleum systems in place, and we just now extend the life of the sources of oil, because we're then blending it with fuel bases and mixes that enable us to extend the life of our petroleum systems, so that when we do see that the oil wells are drying up, the shale fields are drying up, everything is drying up, by that point, either we can be 100% on sustainable fuel systems, or we will have already transitioned to the next fuel platform, like a hydrogen cell or something else, which there's also working on that as well, because hydrogen is very energy dense. When you burn it the proper way, you get a ton of power out of it. I mean, hydrogen bombs, I know, different thing entirely, but still, it's energy. It's a harnessable, controllable, sustainable energy form. We just don't have the technology in place yet to actually make it work. We're working on it, but we're not there yet. But to get there, we can't turn off the lights, which means we need to continue with coal, nuclear, and petroleum fuels in order to make sure that the power we need to do what we got to do to get to that next level is there. Because we're not going to get there with wind and solar turning off the lights 3 days out of 5. It's just not going to work. So that's the problem with trying to be green. Now, when it comes to trying to be green in other ways, I mean, Europe is in a real bind, because they've been trying to outsource their carbon numbers by buying fuel from Russia, and now the sanctions against Russia have been designed not to cripple Russia's oil industry. Number one, because it would essentially send Russia's economy into a complete collapse. They would have nothing to work with, nothing to do at all, essentially, because no one will be buying their energy. And number two, Europe is literally dependent dependent on Russia for their energy. So because Europe has to buy their energy from Russia, they have no choice. I mean, France has a nuclear power system in place that takes care of their house power needs, no problem. But when it comes to their, vehicles, I think they've got to buy some fuel from Russia as well. I don't know for sure, but I know Germany depends on Russia. The Baltic states depend on Russia. The former Soviet nations depend on Russia. Spain, I think, depends on Russia as well. And there's a lot of folks who depend on Russia and their energy exports to keep their lights on, to keep their cars running, to keep their trucks and trains moving. So Europe now has a real problem, because to hit Russia as hard as possible, you've got to hit those energy production facilities with sanctions. They can't do that because they would literally be hamstringing their entire energy infrastructure system regardless. They would be turning the lights out on themselves, which is not good for business. And it's not good when you're trying to, rattle your saber against a possibly aggressive enemy. So what else is Europe trying to do? Well, they're trying to buy wood pellets and wood pulp from the U.S. to outsource their carbon numbers to the U.S., which is biting them in the backside, because they're still burning a fuel source which is much less energy dense than petroleum or coal, so they have to consume a lot more. And at some point we're going to run out of wood pulp in the US, because at some point we have to say, okay, look, you can't buy up all of our trees and grind them up into pellets to burn them in a power plant for London. It's just not going to work. We got to be able to make some houses with this lumber, so you can't have it. It's going to be a problem at some point. It's already a problem now because they cannot meet their energy demands, as they could not last year when I first read this article about this. So Europe is in a problem when it comes to energy. Their wind systems are not giving them enough power. They can't burn enough wood pellets and wood pulp to actually generate the same power they could get from their copious coal fields that they have in England and Scotland and wherever else. So, the UK is in a bind. Ireland might be in a bind. I'm not sure what their power systems are like, but still, Europe is in trouble. And they're going to have to make some hard choices about their energy real soon here, because being dependent on your enemy to sustain you is not a good way to do business. We learned that the hard way in the 70s with the oil embargo, when the Shah of Iran and a few other guys it's like, no, we're just, no more oil for you, it's off. You're done. And, that on the one hand, that did spike the revolution in going away from land yachts to very small, very efficient cars, and it gave Japan and the Japanese automotive industry a leg into the American market, which put Detroit on the back foot, which is really unfortunate for Detroit. But Detroit did not want to build small, efficient cars fast enough, and so Japan came in with Datsun and Honda, pardon me, Mitsubishi and Toyota. And now one in every 3 cars in the US is Japanese in manufacture, if not 2 in every 4. I mean, it's a huge part of the market that is now cornered essentially by a variety of Japanese automakers, and they make fine cars, they really do. But they made them more efficiently, they were cheaper, people went to them in droves, and that started the decline of the Rust Belt. So that had political and economic consequences in the US. Europe's in a similar situation. Yeah, they don't want to be, dirty with their energy systems, but they can't rely on Russia too much longer for their energy, because it gives Russia a seat at the table and the ability to dictate terms in a way that they should not have, because they are knocking over a nation that by all rights should have the ability and the privilege to choose its own direction, its own destiny. Now, as far as I'm aware, Ukraine was minding its own business, and Russia was like, and now, Ukraine's like, to Russia. So it's a whole big mess. But that's where we're at when it comes to energy, and that's one of the consequences of this whole situation that's going to play out over the next few months. And unfortunately, until the situation is resolved in a way that actually benefits the greatest number of people and the greatest number of nations without hamstringing or destroying Ukraine, everything will remain unsettled. So, yeah, fun times. Good Monday. Anyway, at least spring's almost here, right? Could warm up. Hopefully. Anyway, my friends, thank you so much for watching. I'll see you down the road.